side, there is a need for a stronger commitment from the country parties, and also at the same time, our commitment as serving two country parties have a strong commitment from ourselves to support the activities, actions of country parties. Well, I actually would like to join in congratulating the formation of the the SDS coalition. Well, this is a really good opportunity for us to think about how we collaborate not only among the UN agencies and also interactions between the partners and most specifically country partners. So we are here to serve the country, and I think this is time for country to tell us what they need and what we should do for them. Having said though, well, and Jufna from the UNDP already highlighted the importance of source mitigation, but I would not iterate, whole, but I also stress the importance of source mitigation, because source mitigation is the only way to reduce dust emission, I believe. So, well, when we talk about impact mitigation of dust, normally we talk about two-side approach. One side is impact mitigation, and on the other side is source mitigation. Of course, source mitigation is sometimes included in the entire impact mitigation, but the importance of source mitigation is that by having those sources mitigated, you have multiple co-benefits. Not only about reducing dust emission, as said, we have multiple ecosystem services coming out from the health restored land. In a sense that we are envisaging a restoration decade coming up from 2020 and 2030. I would imagine that sort of global SDS initiative within that decade. Actually, these ideas come up from yesterday's plenary session. I think this is a really good idea for us to explore more, and then how we could help shape a element or action component of this global SDS initiative. Another point I would like to is that, I would like to highlight the cooperation. We need to think about how we can deliver these kind of activities, programs, effectively and efficiently. We all know that sand and dust storm is transboundary nature. So without cooperation among countries, different, bordering countries or countries from source area, countries in destination area, we cannot solve the problem entirely. So I really stress the cooperation, regional cooperation specifically is important in addressing this disaster. I can have a very good example that was done in Northeast Asia region. So they established a sub-regional cooperation network specifically focusing on sand and dust storm mitigation activities. And these activities is supported by the UNCCD Secretariat, and there, Mr. Yang Yulin is sitting there, our former colleague. He helped a lot in establishing those the network and operation of those cooperation. So why not? We could copy or learn from this exercise and transfer to the other regions. For example, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, West Asia, part of North Africa, many. So we can build on already existing tools and methodologies approaches. So why not? I think we have already solution on our hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chang, and especially for reminding us about the importance of South-South collaboration on this topic, as indeed it is mostly a topic for a number of countries that can benefit from working more closely together. We move on to WMO. I'll give the floor to you, sir, please.
Thank you very much. Thank Thank you for giving the floor. Dear colleagues, dear colleagues, dear distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I start with a question? Who has been inside a dust storm? Please raise the hand. Well, that's a very, very serious issue. Well, if you have seen the movie The Mummy, it's an exaggeration, but the reality is so scary as this is a wall coming. You cannot see what is the effect at the first sight, but after you are inside, the light is almost zero and it's dark, and there is a lot of effects. Going to the more UN serious approach, we can say that the effect of that sun and dust storm affects many different aspects of current life. Just starting from aviation, stops completely operations when there's a dust storm near an airport. Health, obvious reasons, we cannot, there is many respiratory diseases and also infection diseases that are related with the low levels of dust in the air. Not only sun and dust storms, so this is also related with meningitis, for instance, and dryness. There are agricultural bad effects, especially for cattle, as you could imagine, and also good effects. There's suppose that the Amazonian forest is fed or supported in the nutrients by Saharan dust. So there is a topic that deserves a lot of attention and a lot of efforts. And that's always, the sun and dust storm is carried by winds, so we need a component of atmospheric survey monitoring, but the sources are inland, and there is a strong connection. So we need to first identify those sources, but the soils, how the dust and the aerosols are bring from land to the atmosphere are strongly related with soil management practices. So that's a topic. That's why we have that coalition, because we need a multidisciplinary approach, and also a research approach. It's not, we are starting. So there is it's a topic that in the past 50 years was no attention from the UN system for the countries. No, they are suffered silently, we can say, and they are not taking action. I will, if I can make a presentation, I will short the slides, but it could give you a brief about what WMO is doing in that. Well, just to advertise the WMO, we are the UN specialized agency on dealing with weather, climate, and atmospheric aspects of the environment for the UN system. Well, here is the presentation. We have the main horse battle, we can say, on our action is the system called Sun and Dust Warning Advisory System. Next, please. Next, please. Slide, please. Thank you. This is a global phenomenon. And affect different. I will do in that way. Affect different aspects, as you can see. I mentioned climate change and cryosphere because the aerosols. A colleague showed yesterday there was. Showed that the impact of aerosols were higher than expected, not in terms of cooling, but also is shifting to the other side. So it's a factor that they need to be taken into account. Human health for sure, agriculture, marine productivity. When the dust fell in some marine areas, is a blooming of productivity. So fisheries could be also benefit for this. Aviation, ground transportation, infrastructure, industry, building, etc. So it's a long range. Next, please. So the system that we have built is a global federation of partners endorsed by the Congress of the World Meteorological Organization in 2007. And it's organized around about regional nodes. So our action, and that's also a good way for future action and coalition, it's based on the specific regional nodes, but also in cooperative way. Next one, please. Those are the 3 actual nodes. They are validated, are the Europe, Northern Africa plus Middle East, that's based in Barcelona. The second is the Asian node that is hosted in Beijing by the Chinese Meteorological Agency. And there is a third under final validation in Barbados, in the Caribbean island, and deals with America. Think that there is many issues on transatlantic transport of dust from Sahara. But also there are always sources of local sources of dust in America. So it's something that they need further research and further work. Next, please. Well, I will skip the details. We have about 10 years of publications and scientific work and operational developments on those nodes. Especially the Barcelona node is very, very advanced. It's serving as a training facility, and they are also supporting developments for African, Northern African, and sub-Sahelian countries. Next, please. Here is excerpt of the products that you can see. Normally, the backbone is the 72 hours forecast on aerosol load in the atmosphere. Here you have the products from the 2 nodes, the European, Northern Africa, Middle East, plus the Asian one. There is an overlapping. That's I don't know if somebody from the Middle East region, but there is an overlapping, so we can count on a cooperative approach for both centers to cover that region. And we have also multi-year assessments, so analysis assessments and long-term trends. Next, please. Here is also a brief of different products. It's just not only atmospheric load, it's surface concentration, it's optical properties, plus properties at the extinction in the layer, plus values at surface and at 550 nanometers as the vegetation activity bandwidth, plus dry deposition and wet deposition. Next, please. There are 2 main, the operational scheme is organizing in 2 main areas. One is the forecasting for early warning. There's the products that we need to go to from now is 72 hours, could be up to 10 days, and there is also a force to extend on a climate forecast. It means an idea about what should be the perspective of the sun and dust storms in a future season. No? Not in detail, of course, we cannot forecast the day, but you could have if there will be a higher or lower frequency of those events. And finally is the impact assessment, all the analysis that's related with impact assessment. So that should be the information that the experts in impacts would have available for their work. This is the next, please, on the research, emerging SDS was research issues. As I said, this is something that's new, that's in evolution, that needs efforts, that needs cooperation, that needs funding. Not only for WMO, but for the coalition. There are important research and development topics that are listed here. There's all related with atmospheric behavior of aerosols, the first one. But it is also how they interact with what's the exchange between land and the atmosphere in terms of, so it's a topic that it's pure research, but covers all the areas of our action. Next, please. We need also advances in the numerical models. So that's why it's data simulation, that's retrieving from dust mineralogy from spaceborne measurements, and subseasonal forecasts. Next, please. Attribution. That's we can observe changes in dust sources, but we need to attribute what's the reasons of that change, because this is a national responsibility. And that's related with the UNCCD work. Next, please. New observation. For sure, we need to validate models with deployment of new sensors at ground, and to define new ways to derive from the enormous constellation of actual remote sensing instruments in orbit. We can derive more information from there. Next, please. And finally, the application. Well, this when we are talking about sectors, it's this coalition will, I guess, will bring the opportunity to have better coordinated action, be at UN level, but also national level. So there is room for make cooperative or coordinated approaches for developing sectors applications at national level also. And I believe that is the last one. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, and that was fascinating for somebody who's not a technical expert like me. Also, next session today on the Stand and Dust Storms Day. The next session on the Sand and Dust Storms Day will also look into the technical aspects of mapping, starting at 11:30. So if you would like to know more about that, come back after the coffee break. Thank you again for that, and handing over now to Sanjay from UNSCCD.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to respond to the question of my colleague Hussain. The sand and dust storm in context of sand and dust storm.
You have to just hold it very close.
Sand and dust storm in context of achieving sustainable development goals. It's too broad a topic, but we were tasked in Economic Commission for Asia and Pacific to prove it. Here in this context, I would like to bring to your attention that 2017-2018, the SDG report of Asia Pacific region, They highlight two areas where the region is moving in a negative direction. The one is inequality, region becoming more and more unequal. The second, environmental degradation. So these are the two key messages that came from Asia and Pacific and went to high-level political forum in New York. So these are the two regional issues. If I now take my slides, what is sand and dust storm to do with two core emerging challenges, development challenges, which came from Asia Pacific, inequality and environmental degradation. We were asked to develop a Asia Pacific disaster report and do a deep dive in the root causes of inequality, environmental degradation. What are the key challenges, key factors? We brought out this Asia Pacific disaster report. It was launched last week in Bangkok. And it was, prior to that, it was launched the policy for summary maker version at high-level political forum. Disaster resilience in context of inclusion and empowerment. These are very broad topics, but when you do deep dive, you will know the reasons. My next slide is, when you do a diagnostic analysis from Asia-Pacific region, we found that the region loses $675 billion per annum by disasters, natural disasters of different kinds. And 60% of this was alone because of the drought. You know, the normal notion of Asia-Pacific region was there was more disaster risk accumulated in earthquake, in floods, in typhoon. But when you do a reality check, the more losses coming from slow onset disaster, and that is where the connect between environmental degradation and natural disasters becomes stronger. My next slide is, this is just to sensitize the policymakers, particularly from Asia-Pacific regions, how disaster matters for inequality and empowerment of the community. You see, 1% exposure of the climate risks, it contributes what is called in economics term Gini, the inequality of income. It contributes 0.4 percentage point. And then inequality of opportunity, a decrease in education, infant mortality. You see what a deeper social impact the slow onset disaster have on the community. My next slide says, these disaster risks in the regions are not uniformly distributed. There are hot spots. There are pockets where disaster risk is concentrated, accumulated over the years. For example, the Ring of Fire in Japan, in the Pacific, 90% of the global earthquake happens on Ring of the Fire. The same thing when you come to those hot spots where environmental degradation, disaster risk, poverty, inequality all converge to a point. We found those are the hot spots. And these are the hottest spots where the SDG challenges are very, very critical. So you address environmental degradation, you address disaster resilience, you achieve, to some extent, many sustainable development, the cluster of sustainable development goals. My next slide is coming to what we are doing in Asia Pacific as a part of the UN coalition member. So this is the regions where there are hot spots. We use the base map of UNCCD and pointed out in the hot spot where the region is least prepared. My next slide is the next one. Yes, thank you. When we did a deep dive to see where are the hot spots of dust and sandstorm, my colleagues have already explained, but in Asia-Pacific regions, the real hot spot, North and East Asia, then South, West and Central Asia, partly in Pacific, particularly in Australia. So in these hot spots, what I wanted to bring to your specific attention is a cascading impact of the disaster. Dust and sandstorm alone is one issue. But what happens when dust and sandstorm meets the monsoon thunderstorm? This was something captured last year in May. Dust and sandstorm originated from Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Iran, Pakistan, and from this side of the Bay of Bengal, there was a pre-monsoon clouds, convective system, thunderstorm coming. And both of them meet to a very large geographical area which caused huge loss of life. So you see the impact zone. The impact zone is starting from Persian Gulf to Arabian Sea to Bay of Bengal. So that's a vast geographical area. And these kind of convergence of dust and sandstorm with the pre-monsoon are going to be very frequent in coming days, for which region is least prepared. My next slide from Asia Pacific region, next slide, yeah. Next slide is, then what ISCAP is doing with, as a part of the coalition member. The ISCAP is doing to ISCAP because it's an economic commission. The core mandate is build regional cooperation. My colleague Onta told about regional cooperation in North and East Asia, where ISCAP is the key player. But the idea is how to scale up North and East Asia experience to other part of the regions. So ISCAP is to address this as a trans-boundary challenge. We are mandated by a resolution which followed by General Assembly resolution and UN Environment Assembly resolution.